So good evening. I'd like to call the November 18th regular Planning Commission meeting to order at 7:06 p.m. The committee meeting preceding this just ended, so sorry for the late response. Glad we're coming out the gate with a quorum though. At this point, I'd like to call attendance. A roll call. I'm present. I'm Chair Luke Maruziak, Vice Chair Tessman.
Present.
Commissioner Kilcup.
Present.
Commissioner Lambert.
Present.
And Commissioner Smith.
Present.
And we had a note that Commissioner Murphy would be absent today. So are there any public comments from in-person attendees for items not on the agenda? I'm looking around the room, seeing none. Move on to agenda approval. I move that we approve the November 18th Planning Commission agenda as written. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, agenda is approved. Then we move on to the council liaison report.
All right. Good evening, Commission. I have one thing that I wanted to update you folks on, and that's that the council approved a request for qualifications for, not the qualifications themselves, a request for qualifications for an affordable workforce housing development at a site that is owned by the city and at the end of Gravenstein Court. And this is one of very few potentially developable plots within the city. Even including the UGA, there's just not a lot of really developable land that's left. We do not know what exactly is possible on the land, which is part of why we went with a big part of why we went with a request for qualifications. And that allows the creativity to flow from whatever organizations want to come forward and put in their bid. And for the city, we could work with them to try to come up with some creative solutions to some of the problems with that particular site and with just affordable housing in general. The site is lightly forested. It is on a slope. It's not the steepest slope in the world, but not something you could ignore, and doesn't really have any significant land for parking, where as we have seen with other developments in the city related to affordable housing, parking can become quite an issue. So that's definitely something that's high on the council's radar with regard to this site, but there just isn't a whole lot of land anywhere else. So we're kind of putting the best together for what we could do with what we have. Interested parties might come up with some creative solutions of their own, since they will be experts in the field where most of us are not. And that's why we put out the request. The interested parties will be evaluated based on their past experience, their approach to the various problems involved, their expertise, their finances, and any community partners they can bring forward that could be involved in making the project more likely to succeed. Things like wraparound services, for example, if they have any community partners that could help make those a reality, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm not sure if the request is live yet. Director Artiche, is the website up, or?
No, it's not yet.
It's not quite live yet. All right, but I'm sure it will be soon. All right, and that was it. I'd be happy to take any questions though from the commission.
Let me do the quick round robin. Vice Chair Tessman, any questions for Councilmember Johnson?
Councilmember Johnson, just so I'm clear, basically it's this plot of land looking at Google Earth,
Yep.
South, or I guess east of Woody Creek Park and
Yep.
West of Gravenstein. Okay, interesting. Yeah,
That should
that's
be the
small.
east end of Gravenstein.
Yeah. Oh, east of Gravenstein?
The east end where it kind of dead ends.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, awesome.
East of
Thank you.
Cordonia Park. There we go.
Gotcha. That's the only question I appreciate it.
There is a lot of wetland around there that even though just from the aerial picture, it looks like there's a lot of land, there is not very much that's developable, largely due to wetlands in that region.
Okay. Commissioner Smith?
No questions at this time. Thank you, though.
Okay. Commissioner Kilcup?
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Lambert?
No question, thanks.
Okay. I had two. I mean, one, just to follow on this, um, uh, low cost housing, or the qualification for it. You seem to have high confidence that there'll be multiple interested parties in developing that.
Did I?
Sure seemed like you think there's some folks you could work with. I'm just curious,
Yeah.
is there a basis? Or you're just hopeful?
Yes, so Councilmember Watton, along with a couple other council members, have been working with a group within the wider Snoqualmie Valley that has been interested in trying to find affordable housing solutions across several jurisdictions, as well as unincorporated King County. It is a tough nut to crack, but North Bend did put out a request for proposals, which is technically different from request for qualifications. We spent quite a number of meetings making sure that we understood the difference and which one we wanted to go with. But I will spare you that a little bit of a headache. But they did receive several proposals, and several different groups were interested, and they were able to pick the one that made the most sense to them. So there are several groups. In fact, there's at least one developer that I know of that focuses on affordable housing within the city of Snoqualmie. Not that they have active projects in the city, but that they're based here. So yes, there is evidence that that we could have multiple. I do not know who will come forward or how many will come forward, but I'm hopeful that we could get more than one.
And not to rattle, but is there any estimate on the quantity of households?
Quantity of households and units. So again, that issue of creativity is something that we'll be interested in finding. Pessimists will say somewhere between 30 to 60 units. Optimists will say 70 to 100 units. It all depends on what folks come up with and if they can find enough parking.
Huh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a wide range of what is physically possible with the land. It's a question of what is feasible.
And the range is 30 to 100?
Something like that. Yeah, depending
That's a
on
pretty
where you
wide-
fall on your
pretty wide
range of
range.
optimism.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on a lighter note, I know that you temporarily blocked off King Street towards the train station.
Mhm.
I was curious what the assessment was. Did that work out well, or?
That is a good question. We should put that on the discussion for community development in the near future and how it went and what kind of the community response was. I think that we, just speaking from my own experience, it seems as though we got started on that a little bit later on in the summer, and other communities that had success in the past started their street closures earlier in the summer to kind of capture more of that good weather. I do not know to what degree that had an effect and how effective it was in general, though.
Yes.
So the city didn't actually conduct any kind of event in that closed area on King Street. So we just reopened it up, and we're going to try again for next year.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious.
That was kind of my guess as to how it was. Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Lambert, any comment from our downtown resident?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
All right. That's all I have. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to move that we approve the minutes dated November 4th, 2024. If you'd like a few minutes to review them one more time, I'll give you those because it is more detailed than previous, and compliments for the minute taker for capturing a lot of the things that we covered for the downtown retail district overlay code amendments and all the questions we had for the critical areas ordinance update. So I think did a great job with that, but again, I want to make sure the commission's had a chance to review that. So I'm going to make the motion, and if you want a little bit more time, you can go ahead and request that. So I'm going to move that we approve the minutes dated November 4th, 2024 as written. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes from November 4th approved. And again, thank you for good job capturing those. There was quite a bit to capture there. All right, at this point, we move on to agenda item number 2, critical areas ordinance update.
Just a point of order.
Yes.
Chair, our senior wetland biologist, Jeff Gray, is having some difficulties logging on. He asked for another 10 minutes
Okay.
so he could allow some time to log on to the Zoom link. Would it be okay to switch
Sure.
agenda items or, okay. we
Yes,
can go to retail.
so we'll come back to that. Let's move on to agenda item number 3, historic downtown retail district overlay code amendments. Next steps.
Yeah, great. At this point, we have re-presented the entire packet material from the last week, knowing that there was some follow-up, some questions that were asked by the planning commission, and understanding there was still a bit more discussion that the planning commission should have with regards to the public comments received. And as another kind of further advancement, it was determined that from staff that another public hearing would be in the best interest of the city, considering that people came out to the public hearing and had indicated that they didn't receive a notice or didn't receive enough time to respond to the notice. And the geographic area has expanded to include both BR1 and BR2, and the city would like an opportunity to extend a public notice of hearing to folks within 500 feet of those zones. So going back to one of the questions that was asked by one of the planning commissioners about how non-conforming uses have or have not been factored into the 75% calculation. We went back and took a look at the retail district overlay boundary. And of course, part of the reason why we're proposing an amendment to this boundary is that there are several properties in the retail district overlay that are now part of the River Trail Master Plan. So those are properties that have since been zoned open space. Some of these properties have been acquired by the city, and houses have been demoed, and no, they were not considered or factored into the 25-75%. So, but going forward, I think there was an assumption that if we wanted to get to a 90% compliance for both the BR1 and BR2, that yes, we would stay out of compliance until 90% of the properties within the underlining overlay became retail.
Yeah, we keep it aspirational and grandfather all the housing. Yeah, when we discussed with staff, saying we just did a public hearing and we just went through all the questions, but it seems like that due to the amount of interest we had and the fact that more notice could be made, that we're going to do another round with this. We're going to do another pass, another public hearing. The public hearing is going to be on December 2nd. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so on the next 2 weeks from now will be the next public hearing. And so we'll get a chance to do another lap with all of the issues, but only this time, I think far more, we have a lot more information, a lot more detail. And I think hopefully the folks who are noticed and want to make comments will also have a little bit more detail, because there was a huge amount of clarification that we did after the first public hearing. So that will be on December 2nd. Now, let me poll the commissioners. Are there open questions that we still need to answer and discuss from as it stands now? Vice Chair Tessman?
On that subject, I don't think so. Sure.
Okay. Commissioner Smith?
Not that we haven't already discussed. Yeah, I don't think any new came up from my review.
Yeah, Commissioner Kilcup?
Nothing new from me.
Okay, Commissioner Lambert?
Yeah, I have a couple questions, actually. Sorry, I hate to be the one that's off here. Years ago, I guess 2, 3 years ago, we approved the Sagillo cellar to put in an industrial winery making operation on the gravel parking lot. Do you remember this, Sarah?
Do we get the approval? They definitely presented doing what do they call it, like a wedding, VIP thing. Yes, yeah, at King Street. I don't, I'm trying to think, did we?
You're right. It wasn't approved through this committee, but it was presented as
Right.
part of the sale of the lot, I think is what it was over. My question is, would that meet the requirements to be allowed under our new code amendment? That facility, because it's industrial use winery on the ground floor. And
Well,
it's a wedding venue.
Yeah, at this point, it's
Dead.
gonna be the train museum.
Yeah,
right?
that project is not moving forward. It didn't advance.
So yeah, I think that project's, I don't know, it's totally dead. I think it is dead, actually.
Yeah,
They tried to raise money years ago. I think it was pre-COVID. And I don't know if it was COVID or whatnot, but it just didn't go anywhere.
yeah. Commissioner, that project has been replaced with the anticipated model train museum.
Right, I'm just curious, so a project like that would not have passed our code, the code that we're presenting.
It could be, it could fall under the 10%. So for other uses, and I'd have to actually look and look at the permitted uses table to be fully cognizant of what use they were proposing. Was it a restaurant? Was it a restaurant with retail? Was it a hotel? Was it all three? So,
Yeah, kind of a combination. Yeah, and yeah, I think there was a little retail element to it, but yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if that would have passed that or not, but again, it's that particular one isn't going to go anywhere. And that location, which is one of the most open, undeveloped areas, is right now set aside for the train model museum.
Right.
Um,
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to better understand what it is we're restricting in downtown. Wait, so just for clarity, the houses that currently that are unconforming uses, we are not counting those as part of that 90% retail requirement.
well, we don't have a 90% requirement at this time. We just have a 25-75, and there were some vacant lots as part of the master plan for River Trail along Railroad Avenue that were not counted. They were it's just considered an error, I suppose.
But for the code amendments, the existing houses downtown would be part of, they wouldn't be exempt. They would be part of the 90-10%. They would be counted as non-retail in a retail zoned area.
Okay, I'm getting mixed messages because the planner that presented last week said they wouldn't be counted until they transitioned over to retail and at one point in time, and then they would be counted. So I want clarity on what that means.
Okay.
Andre,
Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, my personal understanding was that we were going in, we'd make this change, they would count, and we know that we'd be out of the proportions, right? That it was aspirational. But my understanding was that they would count.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. Chair, can I just add?
Mhm.
I believe Andrew Levins, our consulting land use planner, had indicated that there's nothing wrong with anyone that has a single family use to continue to use that use. So they would be essentially legal non-conforming, and that's what they're currently at. The only difference would be that now if another use came in, they would be required to put in a retail component at the time of change of use. Unless there was a 90% compliance, then additional uses open up. So that's a slightly different perspective or a slightly different view on the existing single family homes. So
So they will count. So if there's 20% of non-retail use, of which a good chunk of that are the homes, those homes would still be in the non-retail area, would count against that 10%. And yeah, again, it's aspirational. The 90% is aspirational. If it takes decades, fine. But as long as the folks are grandfathered into, keep the homes and until many, councils or whatnot decide to change that, there's no risk of that per this code amendment. In fact, there's no change to that. It's just the 90-10%.
it's
Okay.
aspirational.
So they do count that in the 90-10.
Yeah, they count.
They do.
Okay. Then I guess I'm kind of curious, has anybody reached out to, I don't know the building owner, but whoever's next to Phyllis's pet shop? That shop right there that's been vacant for, I think, the better part of a year, that we're putting additional restrictions on. And, basically have the conversation with them that they are going to be restricted in the uses that they can make and there's no exceptions.
I'm not sure what area you're talking about. What's the?
So you've got the Casa Oaxaca restaurant, and then Phyllis's pet shop, and then that space right next to it that's been empty for over a year.
Next to the market.
And I'm just kind of curious, like if we talk to the business owner that we're going to be putting even more restrictions on their space,
Yeah,
but
we
they can't seem to fill it.
we have been meeting with the property owner and the business owners. We continue to provide this information at our downtown business association meetings. We will do another mailing to all the property owners, for the December 2nd public hearing.
Okay. Did we get any feedback? I guess is what would be my question. Dan.
I didn't catch that, Commissioner Lambert.
Did we get any feedback from them?
I just don't catch. I just don't understand what you said.
He was asking if any feedback was received.
From that location, do you know?
I
It
haven't.
doesn't believe so. I mean, one thing we ran into with Center Street is many of the owners were not local. Now, I don't think that applies downtown, but it'd be interesting to know if that owner is even local.
Okay. Last two things. I guess one is something I'm having trouble with on the decision-making process of this group is I feel like we are, so based on the conversation that we had on riparian zoning and restricting what people could do to their properties up on the ridge, we seemed like that was a non sequitur. We didn't want to even go there. But when restricting what people can do with their property in downtown Snoqualmie or Old Town Snoqualmie, that seems fine.
Well, the ridge is most likely going to have a significant number of non-conforming houses, like 155. So it looks like we need to communicate that and whatnot based on the best available science. It was one of the things that caught everybody off guard. I mean, we didn't think there'd be quite that quantity that we would do there, but I didn't think, I don't know if it's non sequitur. It was just something that we had to do. We got to go deal with. Vice Chair Tissman?
Yeah, my response would be one, like, just understand, like, I think this is shared, but like the going in position is obviously we seek to achieve a quality of decisions for anywhere in the city of Snoqualmie. We're one city. So like, I would say that's the perspective. Now, that being said, there will always be a fundamental difference between downtown, the historic, the historic and economic center of Snoqualmie, right? The cultural center of Snoqualmie. There will always be a fundamental difference between that and, you know, suburban the Ridge, right? And so, you know, the only way to diversify the tax base and increase that economic activity is to push for more retail. And where does that naturally make sense and belong? When you look at the economic, cultural, historical factors, it belongs in old Snoqualmie, right? And center, and that's why we've sought to make retail grow in center as well, right? So I just want to share that perspective, point out that point on downtown. And then the other thing is, again, like we literally just covered, it's actually potentially a worse outcome when we're talking about the potential changes for Snoqualmie Ridge for property owners than what's being discussed and proposed for downtown Snoqualmie. Why? And what do I mean by that? As long as the use change doesn't change for those properties in downtown Snoqualmie, they will continue as they are right now. So this could literally take 100 years to achieve those ratios, right? But if we recommend and the council ultimately approves what's envisioned in terms of protecting the riparian zones, that's going to be immediate. Those are immediate impacts to property owners now, right? So I think it's actually more serious, more consequential, not more serious, but more consequential for property owners on the Ridge than what's envisioned for downtown Snoqualmie. So I would just offer those 3 points.
That was well thought out. Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Kilco?
Yeah, I would like to agree with those 3 points that Vice Chair Tessman just shared. Also, the changes that we are proposing aren't like, it's not directed at downtown. It's really as an effort to protect. So from my perspective, as a former architect and with a background in development, what we're doing is restricting the ability to backfill spaces with uses that would not have eyeballs on the street and also protect the historic buildings. So the idea is to create a more business and neighbor friendly environment are the changes that we're recommending. So I know that it got really misunderstood as it went out to the residents, and communication might have been frustrating, but the intent is to preserve what is great about downtown Snoqualmie, not restrict. And most of the issues of frustration to the residents haven't changed. Those were already in place. And so long as they don't change the use or vacate their unit for over 2 years, if I remember that correctly, then they can be non-conforming as long as they want. So we're not trying to put undue restrictions. And to Vice Chair Tessman's point, you know, there are people who will not be able to make modifications to their property or homes with this riparian like immediately, which is, you know, there's going to be some frustrated homeowners. So I don't know if that helps address Commissioner Lambert your concerns, but I don't think, I understand it was received that way, but I don't think anyone's intent is that way.
But intent aside, like it does have real world consequences for those homeowners now. Those homeowners can't do, for example, one of which is like was looking at Airbnb-ing their property and leaving it, or or leaving for the next couple of years to take care of aging parents. They can't do that now because we're putting in code to say, oh, we're going to expand this zone, and they, like they do not have the opportunity to leave their property vacant. Like, or do they?
The zone doesn't change,
I know the zone does not change,
right?
but if we expand to Maple Street and anybody decides to leave that property for 2 years, right? They have to go to commercial or, retail use. Is that correct?
I'm not going to pretend to know the code exactly, but I mean, the idea is again, with the intent being preservation and safety in that area, vacating a home for 2 years isn't really in the best interest of the community and leaving it dark. Ideally, they would rent it out and maintain the land use, or even have someone occupy for, a lily pad in there. And I don't believe there's any issue restricting an Airbnb.
That-
It
That's,
was not clear when we,
Yeah.
last meeting.
yeah, that's correct. I mean, we don't regulate Airbnbs and we don't regulate whether somebody decides to go on vacation for a year or, board up their house. It is what it is. We don't regulate that.
Am I not correct in if they leave their property vacant for 2 years, it has to conform to retail use?
That's,
Or legal?
yeah, that's incorrect. Maybe they decide not to leave there and they can't sell their property for 2 years and it remains vacant on the market, it has no impact on the retail district overlay.
That's not what was said just 10 minutes earlier.
What land use change occurred in that scenario? What was the triggering event for a land use change?
I would have to go, I'm gonna have to go read the code. I don't know where it's at in the code.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, because my understanding is like, if in this scenario, right? Like the property owner still owns that property. They might not physically occupy it for the 2 years or whatever, but they still own it. They didn't sell it to another, individual for the intent of it being a single family residence. And they didn't sell it to a property manager or whatever for commercial usage. So there was no trigger for a land use change that would now require it to meet that purpose, that retail purpose.
Yeah, the only vacant reference that you might have been remembering is the retail district waivers, where if they left it vacant for so long and, they could demonstrate that they couldn't find a retail use, then it could go to another use.
Okay, I stand corrected until I find.
Yeah.
uh,
And the restriction, going to what Commissioner Kilcup talked about, preservation, is if a downtown homeowner wanted to sell their home because there was a buyer that wanted to, convert it to a real estate office, that would be restricted. And that was the whole idea. I want to preserve either as a home ownership and filling that into one of the approved previously zoned retail uses. So, Commissioner Kilcup?
Oh, sorry, my hand's just still up. But yeah, to that point, this was all spurred from a conversation from several, which I believe I started, several uses that went up on the ridge that they've screened off the windows and really turned their back on the street, which does not create a sense of community. And so the goal is really to have the uses that fill those spaces eventually be ones that are hoping to engage and be part of the community. Now I'll put my hand down.
Okay,
Well, and again, we're going to have another public hearing, basically covering with hopefully clarification and communication compared to the last one. But basically, we're going to cover the same code amendments on December 2nd, within 2 weeks. So again, if there's other questions or concerns or things that we need to detail, by all means, we'll be able to take that input as well.
can I ask one other question?
Sure.
Why are we trying to expand this to include Maple? Maple is all residential. Just curious, like other than the Woodman, which is, on the corner and more towards center anyway. and the new, facility that we just approved. Like it really, like, the backside of Maple is houses.
Well, there was no rezoning. The BR2 is BR2.
Understand where BR2 is. I mean, did we just choose BR1 and BR2 because they were already designated? Like, why not just stick to the main street? It is already our commercial space anyway.
Again, the only change is saying basically the approved usages for BR1 and BR2 remain the same, only as originally recommended with EDB, that goes up to 90-10. So that's, I mean, that was the deal. Yeah.
Let me ask it in a different way. If we go to page 89 in the agenda that was provided, we show current extent in the black line. That's correct. Sorry, I'm looking at it. Obviously, I'm not very much.
If I might, I think the short answer is, right. If you didn't change the boundaries, then literally the retail footprint in Snoqualmie would never change. This is the only path to possibly changing that. It's contiguous with the existing commercial area, and so expansion makes sense. It's on the backside of the Railroad Museum, does have the Woodman. It's on the backside of a dentist's office, right? So like, if we're gonna encourage expansion, we have to do it somewhere. It's within, yeah.
Okay, but didn't Commission Member Kilcup just advocate that the whole intent of this was preserve downtown Snoqualmie, and now it's to encourage change?
I
To
don't think,
accommodate growth. I mean, cities have to grow. That's how it works. And so what we're trying to do, commercial spaces, retail specifically, work best when they're in close proximity for the health of the city itself. And so what we were doing was trying to create a zone here where we're really focusing where that growth could happen that would be for the best health of the city.
exactly.
I mean, we're talking about, what's going to happen over the next 20 some years.
Right, and I'm questioning the
Direction.
I'm questioning the direction in that I fully see, like, or I at least see a lot more the area on if you're looking at the screen on the right hand side, but Maple has been, for the most part, it's residential. I mean, they even carve out some other residential portions that are across the street from the area that we're talking about. So I get that you need a condensed, commercial district, but I'm just wondering why Maple? Anybody answer that?
I think we did, right? Like, it wouldn't be Olmsted because now you're basically 2 blocks removed from Railroad, right? It wouldn't be Silva, right? That doesn't make sense. We want it to be contiguous when it eventually grows, and that's all that there is. I guess is there an alternative out there, right, that achieves the same objectives? That might be top of mind.
Yeah, I mean, easily. There is, like, you could extend the black line down the what is that street? Sorry, the main street, to include those commercial buildings that are down there anyways, including the new Indian restaurant, State Farm office, and then also the the block that's over by Wendy's, shop, like, why not pull in those houses that are down by the river? That seems like a much more logical commercial district in the long term anyway.
So I will tell you, my personal take when we first considered this was you're talking about basically go from Railroad to the northeast all the way to Park, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that makes sense in my mind too, by the very same logic that I communicated to you. That makes sense in my mind as well. I don't remember why that didn't ultimately proceed. Maybe it's something I should have better communicated, but yeah, I mean, that makes sense too. But what's the difference between those homes and the homes on Maple?
I think that's exactly my point. We're making the decision on whose home gets restrictions, and we seem okay with it. I mean, what are we doing to compensate those residents that we are deciding their home, like the state of their home?
There's no loss incurred.
There is a loss incurred if they cannot sell to whoever they want, and they are restricted from doing any sort of, like, for example, there is a house over here on Maple that in the past they have a little of a caboose on their property. They've had a little retail space out of that caboose. Once they do that, they're restricted from doing anything else. Like, we are putting a change on that.
You're saying they're doing retail now.
They are not. They're
not doing it. Uh-huh. I mean, I think maybe there's not a shared understanding of the proposed changes, I think, on this commission, right?
Fair.
Because like, again, they're in that example, regardless of whether they're currently using it for retail or not, want to go back to doing so. I don't believe there's any trigger on literally the land use.
Wait a minute. Then can I get clarification from staff? If a residential space chooses to turn it into a retail space, is it allowed to go back to a residential space? Land use.
Well, they're not, none of these properties are zoned for residential, none of them. So no, that's not a permitted use in this zone.
Chair.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, so that part also wouldn't change. And then the other thing was that the greatest density of businesses downtown is between King and River. So I think that was part of the reasoning behind expanding that particular overlay along Maple as opposed to in some other direction. That's not that there isn't any retail in other areas, but there's definitely a concentration between those two streets. Also, I think another commissioner had their hand up. Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, thank you. No, these are good clarifications because I do see, and I think if I'm looking at the map here, right, if I'm a homeowner that I don't know the zoning in that, I think it's the same. But if I'm living on Maple between King and Fur and Fur and Northern, I can see the writing on the wall, right? It looks like I would probably be next to have my area also included in the historic overlay. So yeah, it does seem like if we're going to focus retail, it should be where the use is already more heavily concentrated retail. If you're, expanding it further down to the earlier point by Commissioner Lambert, it seems to make much more sense to go down towards, Newton and et cetera, et cetera. Just my 2.5 cents.
I think we could, I mean, do we want to revote it?
Well, this overlay conforms to the the BR1, BR2, right?
The
That- that-
business retail.
That's basically how the overlay was judged. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, basically you say you expanded the current extent of the historic district, but basically the overlay basically went to conform to BR1 and BR2, right? And none of that was outside of that. None of that was rezoned.
Sure,
Yes.
could I just ask a question then? Was that area that was further down to the other side of river, going kind of down that way, is that also the same zone or is that a different zoning? Just curious.
That's a
I just
different,
don't think it's historic.
Yeah, so if that's a different zone, then that would
Different
definitely
zone.
require significantly more heavy lifting beyond the scope of really what I think the direction from the council was to the planning commission to start rezoning properties and stuff.
Yeah, let me put this up here. See if it works. Does it work? Yeah, okay. So yeah, all of this overlay. Okay, so I guess call it expansion, but all of this overlay was already zoned BR1, BR2. There was no significant discussion on changing the zoning. It's like zoning is here, let's keep the zoning as is. Let's just expand the overlay to include that zoning. This area here, is that what you're talking about, Commissioner Lambert?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's in a different zone.
that's residential.
Yeah.
Which Commissioner Lambert, that goes to the heart of like, at least the perspective that I'm operating off of, right? Which was, this was, not only is it taking advantage of encouraging retail growth where contiguous to existing retail footprint, right? But essentially it's allowing that path via the least disruptive change, right? Because the zoning essentially already exists, right? There is no change. Versus the counterpoint of those properties on Park, right? That would be a fundamental change in the zoning. I know your perception doesn't probably see them still equivalent, but I mean, that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I mean, the whole discussion was to preserve the usage downtown as zoned, and to go ahead and make that overlay conform to the zoning. And again, we had on the ridge the experience of losing things be basically things that nobody really wanted. They just happened by landowners. We had frosted glass facing one side that nobody was happy about. We lost a restaurant up there, and again, it was like there was nothing we could do about it. It's like, all right, let's put a stake in the ground and try to say, no, we need to preserve this as it's meant to be, as it has been zoned. And yeah, so what you're viewing as an expansion was basically saying, hey, let's really nail down what's going to happen in this zoned area that it complies. So, yeah. Yeah, and that's why I kept going back to the BR1, BR2, because we briefly talked and it goes, no, let's adhere to the zoning that was there and make the overlay conform to that. Any further comments? Okay. Well, again, we're going to have another public hearing. Vice Chair Tessman?
Sorry, hey, Commissioner Lambert, like, if it's awesome that you're here advocating for that perspective, right? Because obviously we're folks, many of us who live on the ridge, and that's like exactly what is needed on the commission, right? But so I really hope people on Maple come to the public hearing in December, right? So we can hear that from them. Now, I think that's important. So I hope that's encouraged. I hope they come.
I do hope they come. I really hope that the city of Snoqualmie can recognize that all of the residents in downtown Snoqualmie are required to have a PO box because we all live within a quarter-mile of that post office. And so if they are trying to mail them to a physical address, it does not work. It has to go to a PO box because I know that was the problem with a lot of members down here.
That's great. I had no idea.
Community Development Director Ateche, do you've, how we've noticed everybody?
We have not mailed the notice yet.
Okay. So, okay, we should check then. We should check to make sure it is the PO box, because we definitely want to make sure the right noticing happens. I mean, the last thing we want is anybody to be surprised. I mean, it was concerning a couple weeks ago when we did the public hearing that there was a lot of clarification that had to happen. And we're still clarifying amongst ourselves in the commission, making sure we understand what we're doing. So the intent was to take the existing zoning, call that the entire historic overlay without changing the zoning, and say, let's take the recommendation of 90-10, make it apply to that existing zoning. That was it. And do that with the intent of preserving what is best, and as well as encouraging a retail expansion where the opportunity arises. And we apply that also to Center Street, not that that's in the conversation, but we also applied that to an expanded portion of Center Street as well. Okay. Commissioner Kilcup?
I just had one question for staff is, I am curious, this obviously, however this has been communicated recently and in the past was news to those residents. So I'm curious, for how long has that zoning been in place? Can we look that up? That the retail overlay was already existing and when that had happened?
Yes, we can look into that. I was
Okay.
just checking. It's been that way prior to 2016 because I'm looking at the official zoning map from 2016, and that is the retail district BR1, BR2 zoning in place.
I just feel like that would be helpful to communicate that it's been that zoning for that period of time and nothing has changed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're not seeing a change.
Yeah. And there is no proposal to change the zoning.
Exactly.
Okay. I suspect we're gonna hear a lot more in 2 weeks. So, okay. But just to echo what Vice Chair Tessman says, appreciate the fact that Commissioner Lambert, we've got a downtown voice, and I'm glad we're going to go through another public hearing and gather whatever feedback we get. I mean that's the whole point of this. But just to reiterate from a clarification standpoint, there was no change in the zoning because there was a real concern of that at the last public hearing. And basically this overlay simply matches the existing zoning, and questions of things that were outside of that. Again, we didn't change any of the boundaries of the zoning or look to rezone any other areas, but rather just apply the 90-10 to the previously zoned areas. Yes, Councilmember Johnson?
So the black line is the original retail overlay, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Well, we have the historic retail overlay.
historic retail overlay. I'm just curious if some of those other properties that may or may not still exist, that are kind of on the fringes, if all of those are actually zoned as being BR1 or BR2, or if any of those were zoned as being residential, especially at that kind of northern end there.
You talking about this end here?
Yeah, essentially that
This-
area.
This was explained as being part of the shoreline
Yeah, it's open space.
open.
So now it's
space.
Yeah, so-
open
yeah.
space. So it's not residential anyway.
Yeah, over time.
or
Yeah,
anything,
over
yeah.
time, the River Trail
Got it.
project took off. The properties were rezoned. I think the district overlay was just forgotten about.
Right.
It's certainly
Got it.
something that has been long overdue to take a look at and rectify.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Smith?
I had to go back through my old notes, but I think it looks like the historic overlay district was created in 1992.
Well, and BR1, BR2 though. Is that zone BR2?
Let's see, the actual zoning.
Okay, so we have an open action to find
Yep.
out when that was done, and it may have been done that far back. I suspect it was quite a while. I suspect it predates 2017 as well. But anyway, the basic idea is like, let's adhere to the previously zoned areas at that 90-10 ratio. That's basically what the code amendments are doing. And avoiding the fate of some areas. In fact, one of the people who talked at the last public hearing was at a debate saying, you know, there was a town that lost, and I was unclear what, there's somebody lost their downtown because it all turned into, and again, I'm not sure this is, but like real estate offices and doctors, it turned into something that they didn't want because they didn't, you know, put a stake in the ground and say, no, we want this to be maintained as our retail area and zoned as we have zoned. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with these code amendments. And I suspect we're going to hear some feedback. Hopefully it is with all this clarification though in 2 weeks. Okay, in interest of time, I'm going to stop the share. And yeah, as far as the just the other comment about the non sequitur, that was not really a non sequitur. It was more of a stunned silence that on the riparian areas that were affecting 155 folks on the ridge. That kind of amazed us. But yeah, that happening is that's gonna have an immediate effect. I suspect we're gonna get some feedback on that one as well. Okay, at this point, it looks like we have Mr. Gray here. So why don't we? Oh, wait, let me just make sure. Any other burning comments or questions on item number 3, historic downtown retail district overlay? Okay, don't see any hands. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 2, the critical areas ordinance update.
So we have Jeff Gray, senior wetland biologist, consultant with OTEC online. Chris, we've got strikeout and underline draft code amendments and a crosswalk, as well as an update to our BAS memo.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna just apologize in advance. My computer melted down. So literally overheated. It's in the refrigerator right now. It won't turn on. So I'm on a loaner computer, but I don't have anything pulled up.
You want me to share screen?
If you can. I think I'll just review the changes that I think I've presented a few times now. The buffer widths are increasing to 200 feet and or 100 feet. And then for the floodplain, we raised the finished floor elevation. The requirement was 1 foot. Now we raised it to 2 feet. So the strike throughs are kind of subtle, but
Jeff, can you see the screen?
I can, yes.
Would it be helpful to go through the crosswalk?
Well, I was gonna offer, because these were included in the packet, is that right?
Yes.
Does the council want me to walk through this line by line?
Commissioner.
Would that help?
The commissioners? It's a planning commission, Jeff.
Yes. Would the commission members want me to walk through it line by line? Some of its definitions. So I'm just figuring out I'd ask you guys first.
Yeah, I think the top summaries would be fine rather than going line by line on this. I mean, let's find out. Is there any questions on wetland definition? Raise a hand, commissioners, if there's any questions on that. Okay, not seeing any hands. Why don't you go on the next one? Definition of fish and wildlife habitat conservation area. Any questions on that? Okay. Go on down to 3, definition sensitive species. So we have a new one here Any wildlife species native to the state of Washington is vulnerable. Any questions on that new definition? Okay. And then moving down, keep going. I'm sorry, Mr. Gray?
I do have just, I was just going to clarify, what's in red is what is new on the right column, if that wasn't clear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And then item 6, we got designated and protecting waters of the state. And again, to Jeff's point, in red, we've got new waters of the state means lakes, rivers, ponds, streams, inland waters, underground waters, salt waters, and all other surface waters. Any questions on that addition? Okay, don't see a hand up. Let's go on to code addition and code update. Again, the red is really that new concept of riparian management zone, an area that has potential to provide full riparian functions synonymous with stream buffer. Primary functions of riparian management zones include shading, bank stability, nutrient input, wood recruitment. And that's kind of a new one that got introduced when we had been going through this. I don't think that was part of the previous code. Any questions?
That's correct.
Okay, and then buffers. Basically critical areas, following associated buffers. I mean, basically areas adjacent, and we talked about the change in those. Keep going down the next one. Wait a minute, go up, look up, what is that table right there? Wait, right there. Okay, here we go, yeah, so here we got the stream buffers, and the change is class 1 streams, class 2 streams, class 3 streams, et cetera. And actually, I did have a question on the science here. I actually walked out to one of these streams that was considered to be a fish bearing. I'm not sure if that'd be a class 2, and there was no water in it. I actually, and it's a pretty wet season. I mean, went down to the to the ravine, and I'm like, there's no water down here. And I looked in between rocks underneath. I think underneath there was some water bubbling, but there was no way that was a fish bearing stream. And I took it all the way to the road underneath, and I still, there was no stream there. So yeah, I'm kind of curious if these classifications were done from overhead. Just, you know, one thing that when we're doing this, it needs to pass the what my eyes see step when it comes to streams. So the question is, how are these classes determined for the streams?
So the data set from the exhibits that I prepared 2 weeks ago it's the Washington Department of Natural Resources data set. Yeah, they did the stream typing. It is just a GIS data set. It's not, I would probably say it's about 75% accurate, to be honest, statewide. It's a little more accurate, I think, in Snoqualmie, but it's not final. DFW tends to make the stream determinations final. From the planning department side of things, when we get a development application, first thing we do is do that stream typing exercise. We don't follow the GIS data sets used kind of like a guidance.
Okay.
So if there is a change, and you know, or if that desktop exercise does not reflect conditions in the field, then we will reclassify it. Stream classification also follows the WAC, and so it's a pretty predictable standard methodology for it. It does include seasonal streams, and if there's not a natural barrier downstream, which is a natural gradient over 16%, or like a waterfall, something that an anadromous fish can't get up, then it could be a non-fish stream. So, but without those natural kind of barriers or some kind of summer refuge, so say for a resident fish like trout, there has to be a pond or something where they can survive during low flow periods, or they can move down and they can kind of come back up with the seasons as flows return. So there is variety in it, but we as biologists confirm stream typing. So if you see a dried stream right now, it doesn't mean it won't be dry in the winter or the spring. And if it is dry, then it won't have certain characteristics to be a stream. It'll just be a confined flow path in a ravine. So
Yeah, my only point is if we're gonna, if something's gonna be classified as a fish bearing stream, particularly as communication goes out for an increased buffer and there's no water in it in this wet season, and yeah, I mean, I suppose I'll check it in January as well, just out of curiosity. I have a feeling, because there's a retention pond right beside it, I have a feeling, if it was a stream, I think it's a runoff at best right now. But anyway, if it's gonna be classified as fish bearing stream, that needs to pass the smell test. And I think there's some areas in that map that just need to be relooked at. That's my point.
Absolutely. I just
Yeah.
reiterate that it would be dependent on a classification, actually having a wetland biologist go out and look at the markers and determine what vegetation was out there and do a proper stream classification or riparian, management zone classification.
Yeah.
And it has to be a natural water course too. It can't be like the stream that's, from a retention pond that's dug out and created in uplands. It has to be a natural water course and meet the definition of a stream. So there are those exemptions.
Okay. And, okay, high water mark means point. Any questions on, number 10? Yes, Vice Chair Tessman?
Not on number 10, but to go back to that last conversation, I mean, not in this packet, but in the previous one, we had the mapping of the projected impacts here. So based off of the information in that last conversation, we're saying that actually, I guess that's like the rough potential impacts, but actually we're gonna have a biologist, no kidding, go out to all of those locations and make it a definitive yes or no on the class of the stream. Do I have that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. It would be dependent on classification at the time of development.
And so eventually, I don't think in this meeting, but I guess maybe the next one, this commission needs to make a recommendation to council on adopting these expanded buffers, but we would do so on essentially that not 100% solution projected impacts map.
Yeah, the map was just used as just kind of a rough estimate or rough guess. And Jeff had mentioned that he used some GIS data. So we do not have classifications for all the critical areas within the city limits. And that was just basically a best guess based on the data that's been available of what could happen with these projected riparian management zone widths and stream wetland buffers.
Okay, thank you so much. My question then becomes why wouldn't we evaluate, why not do that first and then say, okay, no kidding, this is the map, these are going to be the impacts, and we're recommending these buffers that produce that map?
Because the exercise is to take a look at best available science and see what it says and to help inform what widths should be associated with stream corridors or riparian management zones, not to go out and classify every single critical area in the city limits.
Yes, but at least, I mean, it didn't take much for me to check an area that would have affected a couple dozen residents. I was just curious, and it was in walking distance, and it was a trail I walk on. So I said, let me go down this ravine and see the water, and there was no water. And I went all the way down to the road. It'd be very easy to say, what is the condition of these areas that impact the residents? I mean, it would be an easy thing to do. And just make sure the classification is right.
Yeah, but we are not equipped, like we don't have a budget to go and nor would we, when cities update their critical area ordinances, it's not an exercise of classifications of all the critical areas. It's a review and understanding of best available science to help inform what the code should say. So we truly don't know what every single classification is. We know what some of the classifications were when the ridge was built, but critical areas change over time, classifications change over time. So, yeah.
No, I get that, but if we're gonna do this, there will be some notification. And if the classification is based on fish bearing stream and there's no water in the bottom of the ravine, in the wettest part of the year, I think that, that smacks against best available science. That's my point.
You truly may be correct. The river that you went to go visit, maybe Jeff has more, direct information about the classification of that, but likely he doesn't. Likely we don't know exactly what the classification is, and it would take a scientist to go out there and do a formal, critical areas report for that area to determine what it would be.
Yeah, and I apologize if I didn't make that clear. I'm looking at the assumptions that went into that GIS exercise, and the first bullet point I had was that it's an overestimate. So there's also overlapping buffers. I mean, it's not an exponential kind of overestimate, but it's in the ballpark. And then it's based on the data set. So like Emily said, we usually pass those costs either like onto developers for a pass through or something like that, rather than city bearing the cost. And critical areas maps are only used as guidance. They're never used in decision making. It has to go be confirmed in a critical areas report completed by a professional.
Interesting. Councilmember Johnson?
Yeah, I think the point's been made, but if we were going to go out and map all the rivers and streams and put them in the proper classifications for the city of Snoqualmie, I have my degree is in geology, not biology, but it sounds like it would be a monumental effort to do that, even for a region the size of just the city of Snoqualmie. I mean, to that detail, the number of places that are, let's say, the size of the area of the city of Snoqualmie that have been mapped to that kind of detail, I bet are actually fairly small, because as I believe what's been stated by staff and et cetera, is that once a proposal has come in for a development, then the scientist goes out, looks around and says, oh yeah, no, this definitely has fish at this time of year. I get that it's dry during these months, but during these months it actually floods, and that's when this particular species of fish does its migrate, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a much larger task, I think, than just looking at it. Once you're actually implementing policy and saying, here's what the code says, here's what is actually going on, this is the actual type of stream, and then matching the two. Anyway, yeah, I think there'd just be a very huge task to actually try to map that. And one last point is that also nature changes. So just because we did this one giant task one time to map all of the various types of streams and classify them with a biologist and really a team of biologists, well, then by the next time the storms have rolled through, then the various drainages have changed, and now do we do it again? Yeah. So
no, I think
that's the point.
Some houses wanting to expand a deck that are going to say, I can't because I'm next to a fish bearing stream, and it's not. I mean, that's.
Well, then a biologist would go out, I believe, and actually look, and they go, oh yeah, it's definitely fish bearing or not. But it would be at that time, is my understanding of when it would occur. Not based on the map that was presented at the last meeting.
Interesting.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So I see a couple hands up. Commissioner Lambert?
Yes, I have two questions now. One would be that our estimate of 150 is probably way over. That's fair to say, or potentially?
I wouldn't say way over.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
And then going off of what sorry, Joe, I'm Councilmember
Johnson.
Johnson, thank you. Blanking. So if a homeowner is currently in that area where it shows in the map they are restricted and they want to build a porch or expand their deck, that means that they would need to pay a biologist to make that determination, or does the city pay a biologist to make that determination?
No, yeah, it would be a developer application for a single family homeowner. So they would bear the cost of that.
I'm just gonna say that it seems rather restrictive for when we're based off of maps that seem to be not entirely accurate. I don't want to say accurate, but like there's definitely some discrepancies there when we're putting a cost on homeowner.
Yeah, and but the maps aren't authoritative. They have no teeth. They they're just it's so, the original question was, I think, how many structures kind of an idea would be impacted and how much acreage and city property. So I think it was 550 acres, and we went through just the mapping, and just if that extended buffer crossed the structure, we just made a tick. And then we came up with 175. So it's not a very complicated, it's not a very complex, sophisticated kind of way of doing it. It was kind of a planning exercise to get an idea of what the change would look like, or, on a scale of, is it 1,000 structures or at 175? So, it's in more when the 175 ballpark, but it's not definitive by any means.
Yeah, I thought it was 155, but okay. All right, Vice Chair, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lambert.
So Commissioner Lambert's line of question is exactly what I had in my head. Like, if this is what I'm understanding from this conversation, it would be exorbitant for the city to take the time and the money to actually map the stream systems around here to that level of detail, so that it's, no kidding, that one's a class 1 and that one's a class 4, and we know it, right? And we know whether that 155 is 75% accurate or 100% accurate. And then in the same conversation, you're saying, well, it's not authoritative, but it will ultimately guide the implementation of these proposed changes. And so at the end of the day, the burden, if this is implemented, immediately becomes the burden of the homeowner. So it is authoritative.
Yeah, the code changes are authoritative, just the map isn't. Yeah.
Well, so if I'm one of those homeowners on that map, right, on that rough estimate map, how am I going to know whether or not it's incumbent upon me to actually go out and get the biologist to get, like, how's the city going to make a decision on whether or not their deck permit is approved?
It doesn't change, the circumstances don't change. If any property owner that you are concerned about right now, based on the map from the last packet material, wanted to come in and get a permit for some structure that was closer to the critical area, we'd say the same thing. Go get a critical areas report. Tell us what classification is. And then when you know the classification, show us where the buffer or the riparian management zone width ends and where you want to build. I'd say the same thing. And these critical areas change over time. So something that was, mapped or classified 5 years ago or 10 years ago could have a totally different classification now, even without this change.
You're saying with the existing code as it is right now, someone who just wants to put a structure or whatever in their backyard under the current code would have to go determine whether or not it's in a critical area?
If they're building towards a critical area, yes, if they're building towards a critical area and there's a critical area adjacent to their property.
Right, but the previous buffers wouldn't impact that. The new buffers would.
The previous buffers may impact them. I mean, just like I said before, critical areas such as streams, wetlands, erosion hazard areas, landslide hazard areas, they all change over time. They're never set in place in perpetuity. And when you build near a critical area, the city is going to ask every single time, go tell me where the critical area is, what it is and where it is on your property. And then we would evaluate it. We would evaluate the critical areas report associated with that property. And we would make a determination whether or not they were trying to build inside the critical area and or buffer or outside.
Commissioner Kilcup?
I think if I understand correctly, the issue that we're having is that we're making these new rules based on the GIS mapping, which is not totally accurate. And now we're passing this unknown burden onto the residents. So yeah, I'm kind of curious, Jeff, if you could, how is this typically handled? Because I just don't see this going very well for
So
anybody.
the approach is opposite of what you said. So this is the science. The science says stream buffers should be 235, 200 feet. For this suite of functions, DFW does a 500-page synthesis of the science. They review all the academic journals who recommended proper buffer widths for stream functioning. And a lot of it, the council member Johnson, I believe, who is the geologist, there's geomorphology that goes into a lot more of sort of stream functions more than just biology. And then once the science is set, and then it's applied policy wise. And then we take a look and say, okay, so what the science says policy should be this, and then what does the policy change result in? That was sort of the analysis we were looking at. We can't change the science. The science is.
And Jeff, feel free to jump in, but we are replicating the same exact process we used to create the existing critical areas ordinance. So back in 2015, we had to go to the planning commission and we had to show them the science at that time and create, buffer widths, stream buffer widths, for all the classifications. And now we're doing the same thing. We just have different information, new refreshed information that tells us something different than what we currently have.
Okay. Do we understand what that process is to get the critical areas check done and relative costs of what we're passing on to residents?
Well, I guess I'm not sure we're not passing anything off onto residents.
Well, if we use the current best available science based on this map, which is inaccurate, or not completely verified, and then they have to go get a report to prove that, I do think we're passing that on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the map, let me just back up. The map was used as solely to give the commission a rough estimate about how many properties in the entire city of Snoqualmie, and we're talking about a population of 15,000 people, how many structures could potentially be impacted. So we asked our senior wetland biologist to just give us a rough estimate, and he did a little over, 155, 170. So we did that. We used information that was available to us, but by all means, we did not classify all of these streams and wetlands in the city. We just used the best information that we had to give you a rough estimate. So I would prefer that we try not to rely on that map for classification and just rely on it to know that very few structures will be likely impacted from an update to the critical areas ordinance based on best available science.
So what map will be used if it's not the map that we were using?
We don't have a map. We have only an indication of where we think streams are located based on King County's IMAP system. And many, many years ago, they went out and they tried to locate where all the streams are. They tried to locate where landslide hazards areas are, where critical aquifer charge areas are, where wetlands are. But by all means, we do not have, nor does the county, nor does anybody have all the critical areas mapped throughout the city or throughout King County. We just have some areas that are mapped. We know of some classifications from past projects, but we also know that those classifications change over time, and that after about 5 years or so, even 3 years, you'd go out and get a new classification because wetlands and critical areas change.
I understand all of that, but I want to understand what are we approving here as a commission in terms of because I think that the conversation was around expanding the buffers to
Right.
the new best available science, but we don't have a map, and we were just loosely referencing a map that has existed in the past but isn't exactly accurate. So what will be used to create? I guess I'm unclear then. What are we using then to make this change? How will anyone know if they're in a critical area
Yeah,
except for what we're going
Yeah.
over right now?
Can I show, like, we have a zoning map and it shows where streams are located, at least where we believe a stream would be located. So if someone came into the city and wanted to develop their property and I looked at this map, I would say, aha, I believe based on the maps that we currently have in place, that there could be a stream on your property. Please go out and have that looked at by a wetland biologist or environmental expert. And please have that environmental expert tell me, is there a stream on your property? How close? What's the classification? And then when we know the classification, then we would apply the code and say, aha, that classification equals this type of buffer. And then we apply it that way.
And I think that stream layer is the same one that we have on the map, actually, that's on the zoning map.
Well,
It's
I-
just, so,
Yeah, the thing is the buffer change. It went from 75 to 200 and it has a bigger impact. I
Yeah,
mean,
so this-
that's the
Yeah.
thing we're being asked to.
This
approve
is
by best
about
field.
all the information that we have right now on streams. I know you're looking, they're easy to see in the potential annexation area, but they're also shown in other areas of the city. And this is what we basically use. We don't have them classified. We just have the general locations of known streams.
Councilmember Johnson?
Go to Commissioner Lambert first. He's had his hand up for a while and
Okay,
then back to me.
Commissioner Lambert?
I guess I'm hoping maybe you already answered this question. So basically, you're saying that if anybody is within, I don't know, like has a stream on their property, period, or on adjacent property, you say you need a biologist study to make sure that you're not in the riparian area.
yeah, I mean, so like if a developer or a single family residential, they have to look beyond their property boundaries for environmental resources and buffers that might extend back onto their property. So that's sort of environmental regs just don't follow parcel boundaries very well. So the applicant or homeowner is already responsible for looking beyond their own property, if they hire somebody or it's a stream or something like that.
I guess it's more of, I'm trying to get at the determination of hiring that biologist is, it wouldn't matter if we change it to 75 or 250 or whatever it is. As soon as they just have a stream on their property or adjacent to their property, the city just says, you need to go get a biologist study to classify that stream and tell me what the buffer is.
Correct.
Only at the time of proposed development.
Okay. Then we wouldn't really be changing any sort of fee structure on that. It just might be higher restrictions on those properties that do fall in that 200 and something.
Kind of cutting out, but I think, yeah.
Yeah.
It would only be relevant at the time of proposed development.
Got your question, Commissioner Lambert?
Yeah, sorry, this is lowering my hand.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yeah, so I believe that what the commission is looking at is essentially those changes in terms of the buffer widths, and not with regard to any specific streams at all. It's just a hypothetical stream of this type, a hypothetical stream of that type. What is going to be based on the best available science, how far away should they have to be in order to commence the construction that they want to do? So it could be that we have no category 3s anywhere in the city. Could we be that we have no category 1s anywhere in the city, but we have that table of the different categories that are all specifically listed. And then if hypothetically there's a stream that's been identified that goes past a house, and then the house says, well, I want to build a deck toward that potential stream, then the city would say, okay, you're going to have to go because you're close to it, you're building toward it. You're going to have to go and see, are you actually going to be encroaching on that restricted area or not? That's my understanding of what the commission is looking at, is just based on the best available science from our biologists. They're saying this needs to be the new width away from these hypothetical streams that may or may not exist anywhere in the city.
Correct.
There we go.
Okay. So could you go back up to number 9 then? Sure. Let me just see what we got here. Yeah. Yeah, what we're approving irrespective of map, is that the class two buffer that was previously at 75 feet now is at 200 feet. That's really it. Class one is taken up by the shoreline regulations. Don't need to worry about that. Scroll down.
Sure.
And so class three was at 50, now it's at 100. And then class four, I'm not sure what it was, but it's 100. That's basically, if you wanted to compress what we're discussing, it's really that. And the concept of the riparian has been applied to it as well. But really, and when it comes to what would impact us, it's the buffers increase. And that's not apparently that's not a debate. That's just part of the best available science at this point. Is that fair, Mr.
Yes.
Gray?
Yeah.
All right. Number 10, ordinary high water mark. Any comments, questions on that? Okay, and then keep going, monitoring. Yeah, mitigation required to do, wait, will require restoring to ensure. Yeah, actually, that number one right there on the right kind of covers, the city may require that qualified critical area consultant at the direction of the city applicant's expense monitor development proposal, which is pretty much what we just talked about, to ensure the satisfactory mitigation of impacts. Okay. And then number 12. Any questions? Vice Chair Tessman?
Yeah, Chair, do you mind going back to that paragraph?
Yep, go back to 11 right there.
Yeah, so the existing code says the city may require that biologist to come out and attest to whatever level the whether a stream exists and if so, what level. And now we're shifting to the city most definitely
No, it
will require that.
Still says may require.
The
Yeah, it's
city,
the same. City may
So
require.
no,
so can if I could clarify, so this is monitoring for a compensatory mitigation. So if somebody fills in a wetland or a buffer, they have to do a restoration project to offset those impacts. And so this specific section in the code just says when there's required compensatory mitigation, the city will require performance monitoring to make sure that the restoration goals are met. It's kind of consistent with like a developer posting a performance bond for the restoration for a 5-year monitoring period. So we just took the ambiguity out of it because we require monitoring on every project when there's mitigation.
gotcha. That's when there's been degradation. Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay. 12, wait, I got 12. Okay. Any comments on 12? Okay, go down to 13. Invasive plants, noxious weeds. Okay, so the red is the difference. Good.
I know people are reading, but the science behind that one is that there are certain herbicides for blackberries that are approved by ecology, whereas you can get a landscaper to go to them, could do something a lot more toxic. And there's ones that are approved for aquatic habitat usage versus uplands. And so we sort of provide some cover and just say it has to be approved by ecology. Take some of the ambiguity out of it.
Okay. All right. And then 14.
And the reason behind 14 is a lot of times developers, what happens is they will, at least this happened a lot with the SR2 development, is that they will build right up to the buffer line. And then because roots spread out and the structural roots are at least part of the drip line, if not in a 10-foot, radius or 20 feet or so, then they chop half of the structural roots for a tree that's just within the buffer. And then the tree arborist comes along and says, oh, it's a hazard tree. And then you have to take it down. And they're like, well, what's the point of having a buffer to protect trees if you just took down the trees along the buffer line? So a lot of times that's a common scenario. There are building setbacks, things like that. But there's a lot of haggling about what replacement ratios are, and so we just say 3-to-1. And so
Hmm.
that's where that came from.
Okay. And 15. Okay, 16. And 17.
And that's just, it's consistent with DFW's requirements. So it's a little redundancy, but applicants have to do that anyway when they do a stream crossing. We make them send us the hydraulic project approval from DFW as a condition of the land use approval. So
Migration erosion hazard. Okay. Any comments on 18? Any hands? Okay, keep going. 19. Okay. 20. It was deleted. Okay.
and a quick summary, that exemption was deleted. It's not consistent with state law. And so 90.48, which is a state water pollution control act, an applicant, if they did fill a wetland that is isolated and met that classification, which are very few, they'd still have to go pay for an administrative order with the state anyway. So we just deleted it.
Okay. Again, not to rattle this, but we talked when we did the council liaison report about potential affordable housing in an area that's surrounded by wetlands. Is there mitigation that would increase the buildable area there?
You're talking about the property off the parkway ending in 9033?
Yeah, at the end of Gravenstein Court.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
We
mentioned.
don't
it.
know.
No, I mean, there was a no net loss thing in some areas where you could put fill here, but you had to like recreate
Right.
over there. Is that the potential to increase the space you've got?
All of the above are possible. It's just a question of what is actually feasible with the land, and that they cannot encroach on the various kinds of wetland buffers and stuff unless they do an environmental offset, which some properties can do. So yeah, it's just a big open question.
Well, good news is that senior wetland biologist Jeff Gray did a critical areas connaissance level report for that property, and
Okay.
was able to determine where the actual buffers end for the wetlands that are on the property. And that's how we determined approximately 2 acres of net buildable area.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, if there was is there a way to mitigate and increase that by increasing wetlands area?
Well, there's all kinds of flexibility in the code that allow you to do buffer averaging. You could do restoration. You could even potentially go and buy wetland banking.
That's what I was gonna mention.
So there are options.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah. So it all depends on what's needed and why it's needed, and then what would be the best tool in the ordinance to use.
Okay.
Line 21 is supposed to say 2 feet of freeboard, not 3. So I apologize.
So we'll change that. Thank you for noting that.
And just for reference, King County has 3 feet. City of North Bend has 2. I believe areas further west are 2 also. I think Issaquah and stuff, but we can provide, and we have information on that if the council would like to see that.
The commission.
Commission, sorry. Yep.
Definitely commission, yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Let me just go around to Rob. Any other comments on the critical areas? Vice Chair Tessman?
Not for tonight. Thanks, sir.
Okay. And we're gonna have a public hearing on this on the 2nd as well, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Make some, and we're gonna do the potluck on the 2nd as well, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so maybe load up on food here before we get into that. All right. Anything, let me keep going around. Commissioner Smith?
No, the 2nd, that should be a fun night.
Yeah, Commissioner Kilcup?
Nothing for me.
All right, Commissioner Lambert?
Nothing for me.
Okay. All right. All right. Yeah, nothing, boy, that's enough of the controversial issues. Let's talk about a wireless code update introduction. Next, agenda item.
Exciting topic. You have before you in your packet, a staff memo. These are typical, just introductory level staff memo to get your feet wet on new projects that are coming down the pipe. This one is the the wireless code amendment. The wireless code amendment was last updated about 9 years ago. And what we've realized is that not a lot of carriers can actually construct any new wireless facilities in the city. And so the city is constantly approached by wireless carriers for available space. And the siting hierarchy does really promote space that is publicly owned. So the intent of this code update is twofold. One, can we create additional space, opening up potentially more park space for wireless facilities? They are outright permitted in our parks, but in a very limited capacity. And what other updates can we do to kind of catch ourselves to the most current FCC regulations? The FCC updates wireless provisions ongoing, and we want to make sure that our code is in the best state considering those changes that have occurred over the last 9-10 years.
Okay. So in conclusion,
So next steps would be, we would do much like we've been doing for these other code amendments. We need to go back and do the research, come back to you at a future point, and tell you what we found out, provide you a crosswalk, and a strikeout and underline draft set of code amendments for discussion, have a public hearing, and, move on to a recommendation.
right, so let me attempt to go up 10,000 feet. Correct me if I'm wrong, community developer Attache. So the wireless access around Snoqualmie is suboptimal, right? Fair statement, right? And so the thought is there's some things we can do to use some city property to improve that. That would involve putting a tower up. And there's some potential spots in park areas that are that would be hopefully unobtrusive, that would be considered. And that's really what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, and also catching up to where the FCC provisions are. So this could be a twofold type of amendment. Like, not only do we open up some additional space, but we also make sure that our code is compliant with the most current regulations.
Right, right. Open up space and improve the suboptimal wireless access we have.
Yes, we are constantly reminded that there's inadequate space available.
Okay, okay. Anything else on the
That's it.
introduction of this?
No, that's it.
Okay, any questions? I'm sorry, Commissioner Kilcup?
I'm not sure if I understand this correctly, but if we're talking about putting these on public land, including parks, would that, the concern I have is around kind of like the electromagnetic emissions, if that's going near parks where people would occupy, but most specifically children. Would that be related here?
So wireless facilities are currently permitted in our parks, in our community parks. And we are not allowed to consider whether an application for a wireless communication facility could be permitted or not permitted based on any kind of electromagnetic or RF type of, information data.
We're not allowed to.
Wait a minute, wait, I think you said information.
Well, radio frequency waves are not a consideration of permitting when it comes to wireless facilities.
I think you're saying that the safety is baked into the wireless plan. That's, I believe Commissioner Kokop's is saying, is it a safety issue with kids playing in a park next to a wireless tower? Is that what you're saying, Commissioner? Okay. And you're saying that the safety would already be baked into whatever wireless tower would go up there.
I'm just saying that we currently allow wireless facilities in parks. So we just allow them in strategic limited number of parks, and B, no, we don't regulate based on any kind of radio frequency emissions.
I would be interested to know what that potential impact is before we open this up for more to go in.
We are not allowed by law to regulate based on radio frequency emissions.
No, but the FCC does. The FCC.
Well, who's regulating it then?
Yeah, the FCC absolutely regulates. I mean, I used to be a signal officer. I mean.
Okay, so the local government doesn't.
Right,
Yeah,
right, yeah.
so, okay, maybe that's the same thing as baked in.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, the federal, the FCC, and I'm sure it boils down to a state level as well. They absolutely, I mean, they prove nationwide how towers could be and where they can be located or whatnot. So, yeah, that is not I mean, she's right. It's not a local thing, but safety absolutely has got to be baked into it. Yeah.
I'd be curious then what that is that's baked in.
Didn't we have somebody here who used to work wireless? Didn't Commissioner Crone work wireless? This would be a good time. This would be a good time to have him
Bring
here.
him back for the potluck.
Yeah. We ought to get him to the potluck. Yeah, we need somebody with a little bit more recent expertise in that area. But it's a highly regulated thing when they put up wireless stuff. Okay.
Stephen Smith.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Commissioner Coco, I'm not sure how we find an answer to that question. From where we're, Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, well, this is one of those cases where I start to feel really old because I was around the last time we went through this debate back in 2014, and it was a lively discussion that we had. In fact, I just pulled up one of the summaries. We pulled together our issues and concerns, a bulleted list of what were our specific concerns and issues that we wanted to make sure were addressed as a commission back at that point in time. And, it's around protecting community livability, maintaining property values, providing for adequate communication facilities, things like that. There's a lot of details in it, but I'm happy to share that or bring it up at the appropriate time if needed.
Well, now, yeah, I mean, what did you guys dig up though, when it came to that, the lively debate?
Oh, well, there was lots of discussion around location and height, right? The concern was wind, towers potentially falling onto homes, or lots of discussion around making sure that there is appropriate shielding, camouflaging, so that it's not obtrusive to the eye, setbacks, discussions around setbacks, undergrounding of facility of substation. That's not the appropriate term. I can't think of it. Just the equipment needed at the base of the tower, things like that. So,
all right, just Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, I'd be curious about if there are any protections for the event that someone bought a house with this gorgeous view of the glory of Mount Zion, the Cascades, and then tower goes up right in the middle. That could have an effect on property values. I don't happen to be one of the people with that kind of view myself, but yeah, I just wonder if there's any kind of protections along those lines for.
View corridors are still intact into the code.
Right. Yeah.
We're talking about extremely minor changes. There might be less than 100 actual text amendments. Something very minor.
Yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Commissioner Coco.
I honestly forgot my question. I'm so sorry.
All right. All right. Okay, I tell you what, can we reach out to Commissioner Crone? His timing doesn't work out, and that's actually something that I'm gonna bring up in a planning commissioner interest. We're gonna see if there are different timing, but it'd be really good
Yeah.
that we just hit his perfect area of expertise at a moment where he's not here. It'd be really good if we could say, hey, the planning commission would really love to hear you on this topic.
Yeah.
Because I bet he can answer these questions for you. Okay.
I remembered my question.
Yes.
So sorry. I was making sure, I would like to make sure I understand correctly the inquiries that are coming in that says that our cell's service is inadequate. Is that from residents saying that it's inadequate, or is that from the cell service providers that are wanting to build in Snoqualmie?
It's both. So the cellular users call their carriers, and their carriers look at gaps in coverage. They look at dropped calls. And it's been known, a known fact that that carriers are desperate to locate on the ridge and have adequate antennas that serve out and go out down, into downtown Snoqualmie. So it's been that way for many years. And we've basically not been able to entertain any new wireless facilities because of the current code. So if we don't open up some more, opportunity in areas where, we feel like it could be really a suitable location for a wireless carrier, we'll just continue to perpetuate this problem.
Yeah, because I know very little about that industry, but I do know that it's an arms race right now to get the towers up, to get, to have the best coverage. And I just, if the inquiries are coming primarily from the companies, I'm just feeling
Yeah,
hesitant.
it was that way, starting in 2015, it was an arms race. I don't feel the arms race now. I mean, they're pretty much set. Their antennas are up, their networks are working. All they do right now is just replace antennas. It's just, we never were part of the arms race to begin with. And so we're stagnant. They want to bring in, more antennas and more connections, close gaps.
I will just go on record as my hesitancy that will probably resurface.
Mhm.
Okay. Noted. Commissioner Lambert?
If you want to come use your cell phone down at my house, you can get a real life example. It is ridiculous.
In
In what way?
Oh, I get dropped calls and it's bad service all the time
Where are you, on the ridge or downtown?
in downtown. I'm in Old Town, Snoqualmie.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I guess for your question about RF effects and whatnot, if you're particularly curious, I'll find a PowerPoint. We deal with this at the utility because our line workers climb the poles and are actually find themselves right next to these facilities. But anytime that you're 30 feet away and they're positioned in such a way with the building blocking any sort of RF radiation, it is actually a form of radiation from affecting any of the users down on the ground. So they put them up in a way that it's blocked by either buildings or it's sufficiently at height so that it dissipates before it has any effect on humans, etc.
Yeah, these heights are sometimes quite high. To get above the tree heights, they often request pole heights of 120 feet in the air.
Okay. More to follow. Good introduction. I guess that was a controversial issue after all. All right. Any other issue on wireless? Okay, more to follow on that. So I'm going to move on to items of planning commissioner interest, and I wanted to tee it up. Commissioner Crone sent an email that he needs to resign because the way his scheduling works, the 7 p.m. on Monday just doesn't work for him anymore. And I wanted to throw out there for thought, we've got the December 2nd scheduled, but I want to throw out for thought of, is there a different day and time that would work better? I mean, would Tuesdays at 5 PM work better? So, and I want you to think about it. I mean, maybe you have some answers right now, but I always think about that. And let's find out if perhaps the Monday at 7 PM time is not the most optimal for everybody, then at least on the current commission, or even with the previous Commissioner Crone, that we can see what we can do to make a better time. So, and we've talked about this once before. We used to start at 7:30. We moved it up to 7 o'clock. But even then, it sometimes gets problematic, and it'd really be good if we could find a time where, folks could even show up in person, more regularly, and we could just, make it easier for everybody. So be thinking about that. I'm open for, want to do the roundtable if you got some input right now, but be thinking about that because we're going to revisit that on December 2nd. Okay, at this point, I'm going to go around yes, Commissioner Koka.
I would like that personally. This timing is not ideal for me.
Good.
And I would definitely be more apt to be in person if it were earlier.
So something like a Tuesday at 5 PM, I don't know if that works, but
Well, yeah, I mean, there were some slots available even earlier from like a 3 or 3:30 to 5 on a Monday and a Tuesday.
okay.
But really, I mean, I think we could entertain almost any other time.
Okay.
I think staff was kind of looking at keying up before one of the council committees starts at 5 on Monday and Tuesday.
And so we're at 9 o'clock, so we're 2 hours.
I think
We don't, this is kind of a long one. At any rate, so we could do 4, would 4 o'clock on a Monday work? What do you guys think?
About 4:30?
4:30 on a Monday?
It wouldn't work for me. I don't leave the office until about 4:30 or 5.
So you need a later time. You can't come earlier, any day of the week?
Well, I work for Amazon, so I'm gonna be in the office 5 days a week, which is fine. I'm not complaining about that. I'm just saying, I don't foresee like one day being better than the other for that.
Okay. All right, we're gonna.
I don't want to be the only hang up here. Like, if there's something that is like clearly good for everyone, I'll take another look at it. But I'm just telling you, that's my normal.
We'll just see, and again, I'll pull you guys in a second, but see if 4:30 on Monday or any other day of the week would work for you. And that I think would be, it'd be easier for some. I don't know if it works for everybody or not, but we'll see. It'd be easier for me, but I don't know if it worked for everybody.
Yeah, and I should just mention, to pick up on Chair Maruziak's comment about in person or virtual, the city is moving towards a request for remote attendance and putting an emphasis on in-person attendance. So if you had to be remote, you'd have to request it in advance. And if you didn't, could be subject to violation of, the boards and commissions guidance and requirements.
So we're gonna make it a exception
Yes.
process to be hybrid. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I missed the dates. We were all meeting here. Okay. So consider a 4:30 PM start either on Monday or a different day. And we'll try to do that. And actually Monday would be great if we could pull that off. So let's think about that. And let me do a round robin, see if there's any other items of planning commissioner interest. Vice Chair Tessman,
No, thank you.
Commissioner Smith,
I don't have any other items. No.
Commissioner Kilcup,
Nothing more for me.
Commissioner Lambert.
Sorry, but 384th, did we get an update on when that disaster is going to end?
Yes, I could take a look at it. I'll get back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And then before I go to the future agenda, just a reminder, December 2nd, we've got our potluck. So, and it looks like we're also gonna have a public hearing with our potluck. So, yeah, we should be here in person. unless it's a really unusual event, and it's probably will be a longer than usual meeting, so we'll probably go to about this time on the 2nd. But considering we've got public hearing on 2 items. Okay. Moving on to upcoming schedule, future agenda list.
Yeah, you've just kind of covered it, and that's, this is what we have, and no meeting at the last meeting in December.
Yeah, and yeah, I am traveling the rest of December, but basically to the New Year's after the 2nd. So, and I think the council's not, is the council meeting once after the 2nd?
Would be the 6th of January.
Is that when the council meets?
Oh, the council or the commission?
Yeah, I was, the commission's next meeting will be the 6th of January after the 2nd.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of a month gap there. And is the council meeting after the 2nd?
Oh, yeah, the council meeting is December 9th.
Is it next December? Okay. Okay. And then the work program for 2025? There we go.
So this is what we're anticipating for future.
Okay. What's that permitted co-living?
Yeah, some new legislation that came down the pipe that we need to take a look at and see if there are some opportunities to make sure we're compliant with those 2 provisions.
Well, since that's TBD, I'll wait, but my curiosity's peaked, but I'll let it go.
Yeah, but
Okay.
you could Google that citation if you wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right, if there's, sorry, Commissioner Kilcup?
I just wanted to send my regrets that I won't be there next week because I am out of town.
On December 2nd, not next week, December
Yeah,
2nd.
right, sorry. Next meeting.
Ah, okay, okay. Good busting out of the potluck, we see. Fair enough. But let's make sure we get your input on timing. You said you're okay for 4:30?
I am, yeah.
Okay, all right, we'll get the rest of the commissioners. At
I'm
that-
wondering if we could do like a doodle calendar or something to be able to see everyone's availability side by side with when the room is available.
Oh, the room we could use upstairs if we
Hmm.
didn't want to use the council chambers, we could use the upstairs conference room.
Yeah, that would work. I mean, it looks, unless you have a public hearing, but other than
Yeah.
that, it'd work for most meetings. Okay. Okay. Then, anything else, commissioners? All right, then at this point, I move that we adjourn the November 18th Planning Commissioner meeting at 9:08 PM. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Hi,
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.
good
Good night.
night.
Right.
Thanks.